The leader of the Manson cult, Charles Manson, was one of the most well-known serial killers without ever laying a finger on one of his victims, because why do the dirty work when you can have your fake family do it for you? Manson was the product of teen pregnancy. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was 16 years old when she gave birth to him, and his father was a transient laborer that went by the name Colonel. Manson never had any sort of communication with him, though. When Manson was born, his mother did not name him. She wrote no name on his birth certificate. According to the Manson family, Charles was also traded for a pitcher of beer to a waitress in a restaurant while he was still a baby, and was only returned due to his uncle intervening. Along with many other tragic events that occurred while Manson was growing up, his mother was also sent to prison when he was 5. Charles's childhood was far from picture perfect, and behavioral issues began to rise to the surface. After Christmas, Manson saw all the gifts the other kids got and believed they were showing them off to mock him. He gathered every toy he could and threw it into a big woodpile and set them all on fire. He was then sent to the Gibble School for Boys. Manson hated it there and the boys in it. He started robbing stores when he was 13. Manson was later diagnosed by a psychiatrist at the Indiana Boys School that said Manson's rejection, instability, and psychic trauma were to blame for most of his problems. In January 1955, Manson married Rosalie Jean Willis. They then moved to California and had a son named Charles Manson Jr. He later changed his name to Jay White and committed suicide in 1993. Manson soon returned back to prison and divorced Rosalie in 1958. The following year, he married Leona Stevens, but then again divorced in 1963. Finally, 6 years later, the cult was born. It consisted of 6 members. After being sentenced to jail for his killing spree in 2013, Afton and Elaine Burton, also known as Star, claimed they would get married. Manson was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, which is believed to have stemmed from his mother's mistreatment at such a young age. He had a disregard for the feelings of others and broke the law and inflicted violence with no remorse. He did not receive treatment for this, as most of his time was spent with the family on his own or in jail. He didn't get any help. Manson's crimes started when he was younger with robbery and stealing, but soon grew to leading the La Bianca Tate murders. The nature of the murders were unprovoked. The people did not make any threats towards Manson or the family. He wanted to start a race war. Being the Nazi supporter he was, and decided they would be the perfect candidates. The murder spanned over 2 days. The first on August 9, 1969. Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Bolsheka Frylowski, and Jay Sebring were killed by Charles Watson. Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel. They were ordered by Manson to murder them as gruesome as possible. The next night, the La Bianca murder took place, which consisted of Leno LaBianca and Rosemary, his wife. Manson joined the family for this one, but did not actually murder anyone. He only wanted to instill even more fear into the victims than the ones at the Tate residence. There were different accounts on how this murder took place, but Manson claims he tied up the couple separately, then sent Van Houston and Kerwinkle, 2 members of the family, to kill the couple, then marked it as the Black Panthers committed the crime. In the Tate murder, their housekeeper found the bodies mutilated the morning after. The LAPD was then called in to investigate. The La Bianca murder was also under the LAPD jurisdiction. Then they incorrectly informed the public that the 2 murders were not connected, even though they were. The police work was initially very poor, but then due to the family's crime activity, the police apprehended at least a dozen other members. LAPD then issued an arrest warrant for Watson, Kasabian, and Krenwinkel for the involvement in the La Bianca Tate murders, but not Manson or Atkins because they were already in custody for unrelated crimes. Manson believed he had only been trying to save his family members from the nuclear attack that had occurred, and he was the new messiah. Surprisingly, all the members were arrested on unrelated crimes, but then obviously later found guilty of the murders. The police identified and tried the guilty members. The trial began on July 24, 1970, then on January 25, 1971, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and on March 29, 1971, Manson was sentenced to death, but the California Supreme Court outlawed the death penalty, and Manson lived the rest of his life out in the California jail until he died in November of 2017.
Patricia Krenwinkel. She received a death sentence for 7 counts of first-degree murder for the August 9, 1969 deaths of Abigail Folger, Frykowski, Stephen Earl Parent, Sharon Tate Polanski, and Jay Sebring, and the August 10, 1969 deaths of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. She currently is California's longest-serving female prisoner. The 69-year-old has been denied parole 13 times. Leslie Van Houten. Van Houten was arrested and charged in relation to the 1969 killings of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca when she was 19 years old. At her third trial in 1978, she was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy and sentenced to 7 years to life in prison. Susan Atkins. Atkins was convicted for her participation in 8 of these killings, including the most notorious, the Tate murders. Atkins was incarcerated from October 1, 1969 until her death. He was the 3rd member of the twisted sorority that were Charlie's Girls, and the 1st member of the cult to die behind bars in 2009. She was 61 years old. She married twice after she was jailed, and her second husband represented her at several of her 18 parole board hearings. Tex Watson. Watson is now 71 years old and has been serving a life sentence. Behind bars, Watson became an ordained minister and fathered 4 children during conjugal visits. When California ended that perk in 1996 for prisoners serving life sentences, Watson's wife left him for another man. Bruce Davis. Davis is 75 years old and in prison at California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. He became a preacher behind bars just like Watson. Lynette Fromm. She was a member of the family but was never charged for any of the murders. In 1975, she was caught trying to assassinate President Gerald Ford. She is currently 69 years old and served 34 years in prison but got parole in 2009. Linda Kasabian. She was a driver during the killing sprees of her other family members. She later testified against Manson and the rest of the family members. Bobby Besole. Bobby is 70 years old right now and is currently serving a life sentence for stabbing Gary Hinman to death. His parole was denied and will be eligible for a hearing again in 2019. Mary Brunner. She was one of the first members of the Manson cult family. She also had Manson's kid named Michael Valentine. She was not part of any of the murders, but was caught for a gun robbery in 1971 as a way to bust Manson out of prison. She was wounded in a shootout with the cops and paroled in 1977. Fun facts. Charles Manson believed that Helter Skelter by the Beatles was a message sent out to the world that a race war was going to occur in the summer of 1969, and that the blacks were going to rise up and slaughter the white people out of the United States. When it did not occur, Manson took matters into his own hands and showed the blacks how to do it. This is when they killed their first victim, a music teacher named Gary Hinman. They staged it to make it look like the Black Panthers did it. Another fact is that Manson is the only inmate who gets most mail in the world, which is $60,000 per year. While in prison, his expertise and manipulation perfected through the popular book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Another fact was that when Manson was creating his family, he used a tactic of manipulation to make middle-class girls join his group and exploited them through their daddy issues.